Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is Bethel Psychological Services, a division of Bethel Institute of Leadership. Thank you for joining us. I want to speak to you about skills gap in the psychology profession. This presentation is aimed at helping you to consider why you should follow a career as a psychologist. I'm going to provide you with an overview that will help you in making that decision. I decided on this presentation because I have been noticing that in the field of psychology, you get a lot of people who do a psychology degree, but they never further their studies to qualify or register as psychologists, or even consider the field of psychology as their career path. So I'm hoping that this presentation will help you understand the field of psychology, and hopefully by the end of this presentation you will consider following a career as a psychologist. Now for this presentation, I will be focusing on the profession of psychology, so that we can just have an overview of what do we mean when we speak about the professional board of psychology. And I'm also going to be looking at the registered psychologist in South Africa, a bit of a stats, just to give us a context or a background of what is happening within the field. We'll also look at the board examination results, the outcome of the previous years, and we are also going to look at the removal from the register. It's one of the most important aspects that most psychologists are not even aware of. And lastly, we are going to look at the work distributions of psychologists within South Africa. Now, when we speak about a professional board in psychology, we are speaking about all the boards that are registered within the field of health. They register in the health with the Health Professions Councils of South Africa. Now, psychology is one of the board under the HPCSA. There are 12 boards in total. So we are one of the boards there, or we fall under one of the boards that exist there. We are not the biggest board. We are actually having only about 7.19% of the members registered under the board. Our acronym there, as you can see, is PSB. So every time you see in my presentation referring to PSB, I'm referring to the psychology board. So we make up about 7.19%. In terms of the numbers, we're also not that big at all. We make up only 7,732 registered professions or professionals within the psychology board. This is according to the report of 2019-2020. Now, if you compare us with the MDB, which is the Medical and Dental Board, we are actually coming very low there. I mean, I know in the MBD, we are looking at all the doctors and the dentist. They fall under that particular board. But even if you can divide that number, we are not close to the number. Now, I want you to think about it, and this will serve as a background for our presentation. There are shortage of doctors in South Africa as we speak today, but there are at 30,000 doctors and dentists, but there's still a shortage. If we divide that number into half and say 15 are doctors and 15 are dentists, they're still above the psychology board in terms of profession. So you can see that psychologists, there's still a need. I mean, if you look just according to the stats since COVID-19, how many people have been affected mentally who needed psychological intervention, you will understand that the need in psychology is very huge. Now, if you want to understand that 7,732 is not even psychologists, that number is not made up of psychologists only. There are different professions within the board of psychology. I just want to show you this. I mean, 11 people of the numbers in the board of psychology as psychotechnician. About 2,000, they are psychometrists. About 2.6, they are registered counselors. These are not psychologists. If we speak about psychologists, there are only 9,183 psychologists registered in the board of psychology. Now, this is according to the 2021. Don't compare with the previous one. This is the 2021 statistics. I only showed you the previous one just to show you the comparison, because we don't have the latest in terms of all the boards. But in terms of psychology, the latest data, there are 9,183 psychologists registered as we speak today. And when you look at the total of professions within the board of psychology, it looks like the psychologists are a lot compared to the total number within their profession. But that is not until you compare it with the total population that we have in South Africa. You'll understand that South Africa, as we stand now, we are at about, I think we're about at 58 million. We are at about 58.78 million according to the 2019 Stats SA data. So you compare the 9,000 psychologists with the 58.78 psychologists that exist today. You realize that the number is very low. You don't even need to go far. You can just do a simple mathematics. You realize that if I divide that by the number of psychologists, we have about 6,403 persons or people per one psychologist in the entire South Africa. Keep in mind that psychologists work across the age groups, from a child to elderly. Those people, psychologists, they still work with them. So the numbers are very huge. That is why we speak about the skills gap. That is why I want to present to you that there is a gap in psychology that I want you to take advantage of. Hence, I'm making this presentation, and I want to encourage you that you need to consider pursuing a career as a registered psychologist. Now, before I delve further into this topic, just to show you about the gap that exists within psychology, I just want to show you the requirements, the academic requirements that you need to fulfill in order to qualify as a psychologist. I'm not going to say much on this particular part because I have touched on it and elaborated on it in one of my presentation where I speak about how to open a psychology practice. So I encourage you that you look at my other video where I speak about how to open a psychology practice. I explain in details the different levels and what are the things that you need to look out to. But what is most important in terms of the academic requirements is that you need a basic undergraduate psychology degree that will take you at least a minimum of 3 years. And then when you get that, you can then apply and qualify to be registered as a psychology honors student. It will take you a minimum of 1 year to complete an honors qualification. When you have your honors, you can then apply for a psychology master's. It takes a minimum of 2 years to qualify as with a master's in psychology. I'm saying a minimum because some of these programs, they've got a part-time studies where they can add a year in order to assist you to complete that. When you have your master's, then you require to complete a 1 year internship under supervision. And when you have completed your 1 year internship, you are required to write a board exam set by the HPCSA for you to be able to qualify as a psychologist. By the time you write the board exam, you will have completed 7 years of studies. You will have completed 7 years of academic studies, including your internship, before you can write the board exam. Now, you need to know that you don't need a PhD to be registered as a psychologist. A PhD is not a requirement. So you are a psychologist when you pass the board exam. After completing your master's, your 1 year internship, and you pass your board exam, you can register as a psychologist. Now, in terms of the gap, it is very interesting to note that there are thousands of students in undergraduate level in psychology. And there are also hundreds of psychology students at an honors level. There are not so many in a master's level, but you will be shocked that the numbers are still low in terms of the psychologists that we produce a year. Given the big numbers that we have from undergraduate, you wonder why we are not producing psychologists at a very high number. And one of the reasons is actually shown by this particular slide. I want you to see that of all the people who go through the psychology program, master's level, only a few manage to complete and sit for the board exam. I just want you to look at the numbers there. 51 candidates were clinical psychologists, 27 were counseling, 14 were educational, and 45 were industrial psychologists. And you have got 95 registered counselors. These are not your counseling psychologists. They are registered counselors. They only require an honors and also to write the board exam. Together with the psychometrist and the psychometrist with the supervised practice. These are the ones who want to open their own practice. So you can see that the numbers are not as big as you'll have them from an undergrad to an honors level. So the numbers are very low. So all these people who pass the masters, only a few managed to complete their masters and sit for the board exam. This is the cohort for the 2019 June cohort. But also, even on those who write the board exam, for the total of 259, only few also pass, because 33 of them failed from the 259. So you take that and compare with the 40 that failed. Around 70 people who said for the board exam in 2019 are going to rewrite the board exam, which means they can register as professionals within the board of psychology. Now, these are the people now, you must understand, I've showed you there that there are 259 people who said for the June exam, and there are 282 for the October exam. Now, these 73 people who have failed, these are the people who are going to come again and add to the number of 2020. Because when you fail, you are given an opportunity to come and write again. Now compare that with the numbers that we have for 2019 in terms of now the pass rate. Now, when you look at the pass rate, you understand that we had 259 who said for the board exam, 226 passed of the 259. Now there was also an 80 here which were condoned. Basically what that means is that they might have obtained percentages that are closer to the pass mark, and they condone them and give them a pass. And then there were 242 who passed in the October exam and 13 who were condoned. Now when you take the two numbers for both cohorts that wrote the exam in 2019, you'll understand that we only have 489 professions within psychology who passed the board exam and were qualified to register in their specific professions. Mind you, these are not a total of psychologists, a total number of psychologists. This is just the total number of professionals within the field of psychology. So you need to think about it now, because I told you I want to focus particularly on psychologists within the board of psychology. That is why I'm encouraging you that there is a gap in psychology that I would like you to be encouraged to fill. And I want to now zoom in and focus particularly on the numbers of psychologists. And there is a report that came in 2020 examination results. I think that will help us just to have an idea in terms of the numbers of psychologists. Now I want you to look here that there are the number of candidates who said for the psychology exams in 2020 February. There are always two exams in the year. So this was the first one in February. There were 208 candidates who said for that exam. And out of the 208, 154 passed. That's about 74% of them passed. You can see that 41 failed, which means these 41 are going to probably rewrite in October and add to the numbers of October. So when you see the number 208, you must also understand it is including the 73 people who came from the previous year. Some of them might be coming to write again in order to try their luck to pass the board exam. Now, of the 154, there's also 6 that was condoned. And if you take the two numbers, you realize there's a total of 160 people who passed the board exam in the February 2020. This, mind you, are not all the psychologists. It's every professional within the board exam of psychology. Now, if I remove the registered counselor, psychometrist, you'll understand that these are not psychologists. Their scope is limited compared to the psychologist. You realize that the number actually becomes lower there are only 127 psychologists who passed the board exam of February 2020. Only 127. So when you look at the total people who passed the board exam, it looks big. Until you just zoom on the psychologist only, you realize the number is not that big. There's still a lot that needs to be done. Now compare that with what is happening in training at the time the numbers are low. You look at the intense psychologists. These are all psychologists in different fields who are doing internship. There is a total of 736. That is the statistics or the numbers that we got on the 1st of July this year. 736. And remember, given the background I've given you about 2019, where we had only about 489 people who passed. Not all these people are going to pass the board exam. Now, you compare that with the 289 of 2019 and the 160 of the year 2020. I think you will notice that it is likely that we don't even make 2,000 in a period of 3 years. We're not even making 2,000 psychologists in a period of 3 years. The numbers are still drastically low in terms of the psychologists that the country produces in a year. And I will show you in terms of the work distribution how this gap is actually even affecting the numbers in terms of the gap in the field. There are limited psychologists out there that are doing the job on the ground. Now look at the numbers in terms of the different professions who are registered under the board. Now in 2021, according to the report on the 1st of July, there are 11 psychotechnicians, there are 2,068 psychometrists, 2.640 registered counselors, and there are 9,183 psychologists and a total of 13,902. Now you compare that with 9,183, you realize that the numbers are still very low. Although when you look at the two, it makes it as if the numbers are high in terms of psychologists, but they are still very low. Why am I saying that? If you actually now scrutinize the statistics and you look at the previous numbers, I think you will be shocked, but you will notice that there's a strange pattern that I want to explain to you. You look at the number of psychologists that we have in 2021. We have got 9,183 in 2021. These are psychologists registered with HPCSA. But compare that with the number that we had in June 2016. June 2016, that's about 5 years ago. We had about 8,241 psychologists registered. And you look at August of 2018, you can see that when you compare the two, actually, we only had a difference of about 200 psychologists added. From 8.2 to 8.7 psychologists registered in a 2-year period. Now you compare that now with what you have in 2021. You realize that in a period of 5 years, it looks as if we have only produced 414 psychologists. In a period of five years, 414 psychologists. I mean, that's a shocking number. Until you actually scrutinize it further, you will not understand why the numbers are so low. Because although I told you about the low numbers in terms of transition from undergrad to the internship, and also from the internship to the board exam, there are other factors. So people do start psychology and have a degree, but they end up not qualifying as psychologists. And other reasons could be due to lack of admission into the honors program or the master's program, or there could be a slow progression, people not finishing their thesis or the internship, or people could also be dropouts after failing their academic studies or failing the board exam. People give up and decide to follow other career paths. However, there are other reasons that leads to these numbers being very low. And the reason for that is what most psychologists are not aware of, is what we call the removal from the register. Now, when you look at that table, you'll see that under category, there's what we call voluntary erasures. Most psychologists are not aware of this. Voluntary erasures basically means you voluntarily request the HPCSA to remove you from their database or to suspend your registration. Most of the time, when people move overseas and they realize that they are not going to be able to practice, they apply for voluntary erasures. What it basically does, it relieves you from being accountable to pay your annual fees. So you are not going to be penalized for not paying annual fees because you are on a voluntary erasures. But it allows you, when you come back, whenever you come back, you can be able to now activate your registration and just pay your annual fees based on where you left off. Now, there are other reasons people can apply for it. Other people can be incapacitated. You find somebody is sick, is not able to practice anymore. So basically paying the annual fees is going to be costly for them because they're not earning any form of income. So there might be any reasons, but the minute you are a psychologist and you realize that you are failing to practice or earn any money, I will suggest that you consider it, because at least it can bring that relief that you might need, particularly if you think you will not be able to practice for a significant duration of time. But I want you to look at the numbers in terms of the records of 2018 and 2019 reporting in 2020, that there were 1,498 voluntary erasures that were received. That's the number of people who have been removed from the registers, were not part of the data when they count registered psychologists. And there's also what we call suspension for not paying annual fees. Most of the people, they fall into this category without even being aware, because unless you get a letter on your post, which most people don't even check their letters, you might not even be aware that you have been suspended. And when you are suspended, it means when they are counting people who are registered psychologists, they don't include you, because according to them, you are not supposed to be working or practicing as a psychologist. Now, I want you to look at the numbers. 25,276 people suspended for not paying annual fees. I want to encourage you, you don't want to find yourself in this category. If you are working somewhere, and this is most of the people who don't pay their annual fees, you find somebody, they work in an area where their HPCSA registration is not a requirement. They end up ignoring paying their annual fees. So I want to encourage you, if you are registered as a psychologist, unless you are on a voluntary erasure, you need to ensure that your annual fees are paid. Because the minute you are suspended, I'm telling you, what's going to happen is that they also add a penalty for non-payment of annual fees. You might find that within 4 years, 5 years, you owe close to 10,000 rand for not paying your annual fee. It's not a good thing on your records. So make sure that if you are not practicing, you are not earning any income, you consider voluntary erasure. But the minute you are working, you are still active as a psychologist. Whether you are practicing or not practicing, you pay your annual fees. And there's also instruction to erase. There are people who are erased by instruction from the HPCSA. We have about 105. Most of the people there, these are the people whom you find there was a complaint about them to the HPCSA, and there was a hearing, and one of the verdict or the outcome was that a person must be removed from the register. Most of the time you find a person, the way they've conducted themselves, it does not uphold the principle of the Board of Psychology. I'm telling you, as one of the members of the committee who have attended some of this hearing, I can assure you that for you to find yourself being removed due to complaints of clients, you must have done something very serious. It's the last resort. I think HPCSA in the past years have been accused of being very lenient when it comes to the behaviors of professionals. So to be removed due to unprofessionalism, you must have acted in ways that are very drastic. Not many people are removed. You might get a penalty, but for you to be removed due to your unprofessionalism, I don't know what you will have done. So the numbers are low because of that, but also you don't want to find yourself being removed due to that. And also look at, there are people who are removed due to death, unfortunately. And now if you consider COVID, how many psychologists have passed on just from last year to this year due to COVID? Probably that number is going to be higher than what we have in the 2019-2020 annual report. So people also are removed due to death. And it could also happen that the 25,000 people that we have there under suspension, some of them could have died. HPCS you find they just don't know, they're not being informed. They don't have it on their records. They might have suspended people who have passed away already. So the numbers of death could actually even be higher, and some of them could be on the suspension. So you can just imagine now, taking all these numbers together, we've got a staggering figure of 27,005. This is a big number. This is a huge number. Now you will understand why, the board of medical and dental professions are so high and psychology are so low. Our numbers are high in terms of professions registered, but you find a lot of people are suspended, a lot of people are on voluntary erasure, a lot of people are erased due to whatever reason, and there's also death. So all these numbers have an effect on why the numbers in psychology are so low. Now I think it makes sense to you why in 2021 we are saying we only have 9,183 psychologists, and why in 2016 we had 8,241, and in 2018 we have 8,769, but in 2021 we are still remaining within 9,183. That's about 414 increase. Is because some of these people could have been removed from the register. That is why the numbers are low, and that is why I'm telling you there is a gap in psychology, because annually psychologists are being added and annually psychologists are being removed. So the gap will continue existing for such a long time until we start to produce a large number of psychologists from our institutions. So the question will be now, if you are a psychologist, where do you work? And even in that particular category, there's still a gap. I want you to look at this. This is the working context. According to the study which was done in 2016, they looked at a sample of about 1.9, and they looked at where do psychologists work. And what they found out was that about 40% of psychologists are in private practice or limited private practice. So you can imagine now, majority of fields of work, they've got limited number of psychologists. You speak about private organization, higher education, public service, government schools, private school, NGO. The number of psychologists, the percentages are very low. They are very low. That is why I speak about a gap in psychology. That is why I encourage you. You need to consider following a career in psychology. Pursue to be registered as a psychologist. Now allow me to close with the words of one of the most effective counselor who has ever lived on this earth that I know. He said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord for the harvest. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you that let us go to work. But before you log off, if you are new to our channel, please remember to click the thumbs up button or the like button and subscribe to our channel. And also remember to click on the bell so that you don't miss any video that we post. Thank you so much for watching this channel.